All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to completely unpack one of America's most bizarre, chilling, and honestly just completely unsolved true crime mysteries. We are traveling back in time to the historic, bustling city of New Orleans for a story that perfectly blends absolutely terrifying brutality with the vibrant, unmistakable sound of early jazz music. Get ready, because the historical facts we're about to look at, well, they really show just how easily mass hysteria can grip an entire population. It's one of those cases that proves reality is absolutely stranger and for sure, far more frightening than fiction.
Play jazz or get the axe. I mean, it sounds exactly like a cheesy line from a pulp horror novel, doesn't it? But no, this was the very grim, very literal reality for an entire city held hostage by a killer's just bizarre musical demands. So let's look at how this unbelievable nightmare actually started.
Section 1. The Midnight Intruder.
Okay, to really understand the terror here, we need to set the scene. Between May 1918 and October 1919, New Orleans, which was this vibrant cultural melting pot, was gripped by this visceral, paralyzing fear. A wave of brutal home invasions just started sweeping through the neighborhoods, all carried out by a predator the papers dubbed the Axeman. And his MO? It was terrifyingly patient. Step 1. He'd go up to a house in the dead of night and meticulously chisel out a backdoor panel. Step 2. Slip in super quietly. Step 3, and honestly, this is where the horrifying intimacy of these crimes really hits you. The intruder didn't even bring a weapon with him. No, he would actually search the house to find the victim's own axe or straight razor. And finally, step 4, he'd strike his victims while they were fast asleep in their beds. I mean, using someone's own tools against them in their most vulnerable state, it's just truly chilling.
Now, you might be thinking this was just random, chaotic violence, but actually it wasn't. Notice the specific demographics here. The primary targets were Italian immigrants and local grocers. So this wasn't just a random cross-section of the city. The killer was focusing on a very specific community. Keep that fact in your back pocket, because it lays some absolutely crucial groundwork for when we try to figure out the killer's true motive a little later on.
Section 2. The Demon's Ultimatum.
So let's jump forward a bit to March 13th, 1919. On this specific day, a published letter completely changed the nature of this crime spree, basically elevating this local serial killer into a legendary, almost mythical figure of terror. The letter claimed to be written by the Axeman himself, declaring that he was literally a demon from hell. Read this quote with me, it's wild. "I am very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the nether regions that every person shall be spared, in whose home a jazz band is in full blast at the time I have just mentioned. One thing is certain, and that is that some of your people who do not jazz it on Tuesday night will get the axe." And he set this incredibly specific deadline for exactly 12:15 a.m. on Tuesday. It was a theatrical, incredibly menacing ultimatum delivered straight to an entire city.
Section 3. The Night of Jazz.
You can imagine what happened next. As that Tuesday deadline got closer, a city that was already totally on edge was just pushed into an absolute frenzy. Play jazz or else. And believe me, the city listened. The scene across New Orleans that night was vibrant, but it was rooted in just sheer desperation. Terrified citizens completely packed into local jazz clubs, dance halls, and bars. If you stayed home, well, you certainly didn't sleep. You cranked up your phonograph to play jazz records at absolutely full volume. Amateur musicians were literally pulling brass instruments out of their closets and blaring them into the night out of pure terror. The entire city was literally echoing with jazz. And what was the result of this frantic, citywide concert? Zero. True to the letter's word, when the sun finally came up the next morning, absolutely zero murders had occurred that night. The Axeman had apparently been satisfied.
Section 4. Unmasking the Axeman.
Okay, let's pivot away from the legend for a second, put on our detective hats, and contrast the two prevailing theories here to see if we can understand who is actually holding the axe. On one hand, we've got the lone psychopath theory. This suggests the killer was just a madman with genuine supernatural delusions, entirely obsessed with jazz music and completely power-hungry. Someone who literally just wanted to see an entire city dance to his tune. But on the flip side, we have the mafia extortionist theory. A lot of criminologists believe the killer wasn't a supernatural demon at all, but rather a front for the early Italian mafia, known as the Black Hand. Remember that earlier point we made about the victims? Well, by targeting independent Italian grocers who maybe refused to pay protection money, organized crime could have totally used this whole Axeman myth to terrify the community and disguise a brutal extortion racket. So we really have to ask ourselves, why demand jazz music at all?
I mean, if it was a lone psychopath, maybe it was a genuine obsession with the city's emerging musical culture. Or maybe it was just a massive ego trip. But what if it was the organized crime angle? Some suggest a much more calculated, honestly terrifying reason. Demanding loud jazz music all over the city acts as the perfect acoustic cover to drown out the victim's screams while the real business of extortion and murder takes place.
Let's look a little closer at the specific anomaly of the killer's entry method. Was this person a master carpenter or just a really observant stalker? Let's see what the actual physical evidence tells us about their background. Let's break down the facts of this whole chisel MO. The killer consistently removed backdoor panels by slowly chiseling them out. Guys, this is not a quick process. It requires immense time and patience. It shows a complete lack of fear of getting caught in the act of breaking in. Furthermore, sneaking through a dark, totally unfamiliar house to find a weapon and then locating the bedroom, that implies an incredibly intimate knowledge of the home layouts and the victim's exact sleeping habits. Actually, scratch the idea of a chaotic, supernatural demon. This methodical patience points way more toward a calculated stalker or someone with deep, deep ties to the community. So let's pull back and review this chilling timeline. The brutal attacks begin in May of 1918. Almost a year later, on March 13, 1919, the famous Demon Letter hits the papers, which leads directly to the Night of Jazz on Tuesday, March 19th, where the city literally plays for its life. And then, in October 1919, the attacks just abruptly stop. Just as suddenly as the nightmare began, it vanished. Poof. And to this day, no one has ever been officially tried or convicted for these serial killings. Which leaves us with this final, eerie question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. Was the demand for jazz a madman's pure obsession, or was it a brilliant, coldly calculated cover-up for a brutal extortion racket? The evidence really forces us to look past the spooky supernatural legend and examine the cold hard logic of the crimes themselves. The Axeman of New Orleans remains one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries, a terrifying intersection of culture and crime that still haunts history today. It's a sobering reminder of how easily fear can completely manipulate a community, and how the truth is often much, much darker than the myths we create. So think about the evidence we've covered today and ask yourself, who do you think was really holding the axe? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the history you think you know.